Hello, folks, and welcome to Got Your Back NHL Edition. LeBrun, Rishaug, and MJ today. Got a great podcast in store for you. Lots of interesting hockey talk. Going to talk about the playoff races. A little bit about Leon Draisaitl, another 100-point season for him. And how about that fighting after a clean hit in hockey? It's a hot debate right now. We got our ultimate arbiter, Terry Ryan, on it. And we'll have a chat with Johnny and Pierre. We're talking about it at the GM meetings right now. So is there going to be any movement? Not sure. Got Your Back is always brought to you by Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals. Did you know Cross Country Canada is the first and only company in all of Canada to offer mobile warehouses? Anywhere there's a big job to be done, Cross Country will place a mobile warehouse directly on site. The warehouses are then stocked with all the inventory needed for the job. So if it's on a pipeline spread or a mining site, big construction developments, the warehouse inventory consists of the supplies and tools for that job specifically. They're all about making it easy for their customers, and we are thrilled to have Cross Country Canada as title sponsors on Got Your Back, LeBrun and Rishaug. Okay, delayed in our taping today because Mike Johnson is always high maintenance. Travel issues. Johnny, what the heck happened?
Listen, don't blame me. Don't blame the flights. I don't know. You know, it's been not a bad year. We all travel around quite a bit. Maybe me a bit more than you guys.
Yeah.
But I haven't had too many travel issues with weather or planes or customs or whatever. But I got the email like midnight last night that my 6 a.m. flight that I was taking specifically early just so I can make your preferred time, Shoggy, was going to be delayed till 8:30 in the morning. So I had to hustle home and jump on now. But listen, I'm here. I'm happy to be here. But yeah, the reason I take the early flights is to accommodate you to begin with.
Really? Remember, I'm 2 hours behind. So this whole operation's way earlier for me.
This is true. I feel for you sometimes.
I reschedule my optometrist appointment. I literally right now, as we speak, as we tape this, I'm supposed to be in a chair getting my eyes checked.
Hang on, Pierre. I don't remember you wearing glasses. Do you need glasses for the first time? What's going on?
Yeah, I wear daily contact lenses.
Okay.
So I usually switch to glasses at night if I'm not on air because it's better for your eyes. Yeah.
You're not.
I'm pretty blind.
You're not supposed to be at the optometrist. You're supposed to be suntanning in Florida right now, my man. That's where you're supposed to be. The GM meetings.
I've had a few people down at the GM meetings reach out and say, "Where are you?" That's the first one I've missed in a long time. I pulled the plug on that meeting a few weeks ago. I'll just fess up to this because it's the truth, but my son started his playoffs this week and I didn't want to miss.
Oh, I like it.
So there you go.
I like it. Are they still alive in the playoffs?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I like it.
That's a boondoggle of a gig though, man. Like it's a good gig. So I get kids' playoffs are pretty meaningful, but man, oh man,
I'm pretty sure I'll be back next year. And the big thing with the GM meetings is not so much the news or lack of news. It wasn't very newsy this week, but it's more just a chance to see all these GMs in person in one place and, a network and so on. That's the real point of it all. It's not so much. I mean, the league has now gone out of its way to water down the meaning of this actual meeting over the years. I mean, you used to go there and like everyone's hair was on fire. Rule 48, this is happening, and people bickering at each other. And now it's a very, very quiet thing compared to when I started.
I like it better with the idea of them bickering and yelling and screaming and arguing over stuff, passionately defending or advocating for something. That's what I want to see.
In fact, I'm so old that when I started covering the GM meetings, they used to have it before the trade deadline.
Oh, yeah.
That was wild.
That would be great. Yeah. Everyone together that they could kind of...
This is it. And then you could sort of, try to speculate,
sniff it out.
Exactly.
These guys are talking to each other again over in the corner. What are they doing?
It's like the hour and a half before the draft on the draft floor where we're all sitting in the stands like, who's talking to who? It would be 2 days of that in the Florida sun when really most of the time they're just sitting there sipping mimosas talking about their golf game, Pierre, I think is what usually is going on.
The funny thing is when we see the GMs go up to each other to draft, it actually sometimes does lead to a trade.
Yeah.
They really are having a conversation about, did you mean that? Instead of picking up the phone. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that staying home brought you was a dynamite quote from Nate MacKinnon. So we're going to get to that in a moment, and lots of hockey talk in the breakdown, brought to you by Kuma Outdoor Gear. They have a wide range of gear to fit all your outdoor needs, from super high quality camping chairs that are comfortable, they're luxurious. I've sat in them. And did you know they actually can come heated for those of us out here in Alberta? Want to do a little spring or fall sitting outside by the fire? Sleeping bags, tents, travel games, pet products, drinkware. I've got my trusty drinkware here from Kuma that I love. You guys, yours is on the way. You will have it sometime in the next month. Kuma will make sure that you are just as comfortable outside as you are in your living room. They've got locations across North America. Their gear is available, so go to kumaoutdoorgear.com to find a retailer near you and check out all that they have to offer. I like the quote from Nate MacKinnon. Nice synergy with Daryl Sutter's quote last year about 8 days wasted against the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the playoffs. And there's been a lot of talk about the Avs this year, Pierre, and where they're at. They've had some losing streaks. They've had some injuries. But it feels like they want to put a stamp on the idea that they're back and they're to be taken seriously. And Nate MacKinnon had a quote along those lines.
By the way, it was a year ago today that Daryl Sutter famously dropped that line about 8 wasted days if you're a wildcard team playing Colorado. He was wrong. It was 6 days that it took Colorado to sweep Nashville. A couple of months later. Such a funny thing. Listen, I hope I gave this justice in my piece in The Athletic today. Nathan MacKinnon didn't come out after practice yesterday here in Toronto and, guns a-blazing. He was answering questions from a handful of us writers who were at the Avalanche practice. And he was talking about the year in general, and it's been a grind and all the injuries. But then, he said what I think a lot of us think, which is that I'm sure there's not any teams that want to play us in the first round if we're a wild card. Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. I think that is a true statement, because this team, ever since hitting rock bottom on January 12th when they lost 3-2 in Chicago, their 7th loss in 8 games. I don't have the record in front of me. I think there's something like 17-5-3. Yeah, 17-5-3 since that rock bottom moment. They're still not healthy. In fact, they're still getting key injuries. Arturi Lehkonen going down for 4 to 6 weeks is a huge injury for what the kind of season he was having and where he fits into that top 6. But they just keep finding a way. And I think, listen, Nathan MacKinnon wasn't being like arrogant or trying to provide bulletin board material for anyone. He was just answering questions about the belief in the Cup champions. They still believe. And the West is wide open. And I think you could tell that they're just like, let's get in. Let's see what we can do.
Well, I think if you look at the bet, they're the betting favorite in the Western Conference to go to the Stanley Cup final. Like, even though they are currently out of a wild card spot, they just jumped into third. They may end up with home ice when it's all said and done, flip-flopping with whoever, Winnipeg and whoever else is chasing them. But I think there is the sort of sleeping giant that everyone's afraid of. They haven't looked this year like they've looked the previous 2 years. Right. I think that's fair to say. Yeah. And it's not because they're not good. I think they just haven't had the bodies around to be as good as they were. And that's the idea, like, and it feels like a big if, because, they keep saying, well, when we get healthy, they haven't ever been healthy. Mm-hmm. So the assumption that on April 15th it's going to happen like that may be a bit of an assumption. But if they get healthy, they get Landeskog back and they get Lehkonen back, and maybe Eric Johnson comes back around that time or sometime thereafter. That team, even if they're not as good as last year, is still probably the favorite in the West. So, yeah, he's speaking the truth. I don't think it's inflammatory or insulting to anyone else. If you're Dallas and you have this great year, do you think you want your reward for finishing first to be Colorado healthy as a wild card? Forget it. That'd be a nightmare.
Right. Yeah. But they may not get healthy, and that's the thing that...
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, Landeskog, right? I mean, hasn't played a game this year, and I know they're hoping he'll be back in the playoffs, but is it ready to go right away? And I don't know, what level can you hit after sitting an entire season and popping back in for the playoffs?
Shoggy, the problem is Kucherov showed you could be like a Conn Smythe rebel, but that's not normal, right? Like, he's not normal. So, like, Landeskog, who's a great player of his own, I don't think, he probably would be a bit rusty, even if Kucherov wasn't. So you're right. Even if they get healthy, and you have Darren Helm, I guess, floating around too, he might be coming back. They have bodies that are coming back, but and they're not as good as last year, right? The Nazem Kadri thing, the Burakovsky thing, they're not quite as deep as last year up front.
JT Compher's had a great year sort of responding for some of that void, but they're just not as deep. And, when I asked Jared Bednar for an update on Landeskog yesterday, by the way, because it's kind of been this mysterious what exactly is going on. He had his second knee surgery in 8 months in October, played through a ton of pain in the playoffs, just gutted it out. And the answer I got yesterday from Jared Bednar, because I said, is there any clarity? And his quote was, there is no clarity. He's skating. He said he's, getting better. But he says, I can't tell you if he'll be back before the end of the regular season. I can't tell you if he'll be back for the start of the postseason.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's a big part of that team, boy.
Currently sitting at 80 points, 7 back at Dallas for top spot in the Central, 10 back in the lead in the West. But they do have 3 games in hand as of right now, as of taping here on Wednesday morning on the Dallas Stars. Meanwhile, the race for a playoff spot, in particular by Canadian teams, feels like a bit of a sputter at times. Winnipeg, Calgary, Ottawa, all losing games last night. But I do want to focus, Pierre, on the Winnipeg Jets. Listen, they're in a tailspin here. They've lost 8 of 11. They've given up 4 or more goals in 8 of 11. Last night they drop a game 5-3 to Carolina, and Rick Bowness is benching the likes of Connor, Scheifele, Niederreiter for a big portion of the game. They're not just losing games. Important players are getting lost in the shuffle here, Pierre. What's the DEFCON level at with the Winnipeg Jets?
Well, I guess John Cooper brought back benching of big stars.
Made it fashionable again.
I actually think the Jets have played some pretty spirited hockey on this road trip. You could tell they sense that their season's on the line. I actually didn't think they played a bad game last night in Carolina. I was watching that game a lot. But they did lose again, and so the only thing that matters right now is they keep losing games in general over the last month. And what's fascinating to me is that it's like the Jets and the Flames are begging the National Predators, who sold half their roster, to get back in the race. The Predators have games in hand and are right there. It's kind of a nutty thing right now, and for the last, or one of the wild card spots in the West. But you can't have this conversation about the Jets and not go bigger picture, because it's like the elephant in the room. We talked earlier this year, Rick Bowness came in, breath of fresh air, took the C off Wheeler, trying to rehabilitate the dressing room culture there, blah, blah, blah. Well, now you're like, boy, if this team misses, what happens with Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's already said, or at least did last summer, he didn't want to commit long-term. Mark Scheifele has a year left before his UFA. Connor Hellebuck has a year left before his UFA. Where is this all headed? If the Jets crash and burn? I hope they don't. They're a fun team to watch. I hope they make it, but boy, that could be a unbelievable offseason there.
Yeah, a lot at stake. I mean, listen, if it's John Cooper can bench his best players and they're Stanley Cup champs, maybe it could work for Rick Bowness as well. It's maybe not that big of a deal. Hellebuck played well in the wins. You'd like to think that they would be able to be good enough that they don't need greatness from their goaltender. Feels right now maybe they do. And it's interesting because when you think about Winnipeg, you don't necessarily think about a team that would have trouble scoring. But if you look at the 8 teams that are in the playoffs in the West right now, only the Wild, who we know cannot score, have scored fewer goals than them. So, we talk about Hellebuck a lot. We talk about the defense, but amazingly, it's kind of the offense that has sort of been not as good as it is perceived as being. So if I'm going to, shine a spotlight on guys down the stretch, it's got to be your top players. The guys Pierre just mentioned, all those franchise players that they have there that have to be better scoring goals, not just worry about keeping them out.
To your point, Pierre, about them not playing bad, I'm going to play a clip here from Rick Bowness. So he talked about how other lines were better and they just needed to play the guys that were going better. But I found it interesting that he characterized their play overall as one of their better games in a game where his top line was benched.
Overall, listen, that's the best game we played on the road trip. It really is. We held a high shot volume team to 24, 25 shots on net. They didn't have 10 scoring chances tonight, so the team game was really, really good. So we're really happy with that. Did a couple of guys have a tough night? Yeah, that's going to happen. So what you do, you move on and get ready for Boston Thursday night.
Best game on the road trip, Johnny, on a night where you bench your top line for a significant amount of time. I don't know. What do you expect from Scheifele and company? Or, I know things have been tense at times there, but the sense is it's better in the room this year and things have been going fairly well. They just bounce back from this and pick up, or does this affect things?
No, I don't think there's any residual impact other than, getting their attention and they'll have an opportunity to play better next game. I don't think they'll be so slighted or embarrassed or whatever, angry that they won't respond the right way. They have 14 games left. They have 4 weeks left in the season. And they're right there to make the playoffs. I'd expect them to respond, passionately. And I think what Rick Bowness is trying to say by that message, if I'm in the room and I hear Rick Bowness say that, what he's saying is what makes us good is our play without the puck. So that's what we got to be better at. Not, we're missing our top guys who don't dance around and make nice plays. Our game has got to be rooted in defense, which it largely has been this year, as I just mentioned. That's the message he's driving home. It was our best game because it was our best game without the puck. Mm-hmm. And that's why we can afford to sit down our top guys that are good with it. And I think that's a reminder, that's how they need to play the rest of the way.
So the Flames and Senators, go ahead, Pierre.
I was just going to say, and I don't want to get sidetracked because I know we've got other things to cover, but watching Hellebuck, this is a time of year where, Montreal used to get in trouble like this when they were chasing the standings with Carey Price. You started the year by saying sports science, we don't want our number one goalie to play X amount of games. We want to make sure that but then you get to March and you're like, oh my God, we need every point that's on the table. and so that's the one thing I wonder with the wear and tear with Hellebuck. And I think Rick Bowness done a good job of spelling him. I'm just saying, how is he not net now almost the rest of the way? You don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
Flames and Senators both drop games, both trying to find a way to will themselves into a position. 4-3, the Flames lose to Arizona. They've got 3 wins in their last 10. The Senators are 6 points out on the Islanders. They do have a couple of games in hand, have lost 4 out of 5. I don't know, Johnny, Mystic Mike, if you were to handicap which team, Flames or Senators, have a better chance of actually figuring out a way to get there, where's your money?
Well, my money probably would go to Calgary, not because I believe they will, but because I think Ottawa just has so many teams to jump over. There's just too much traffic between them and the playoffs. And they went on this road trip, 5-gamer, and they played, Edmonton, and yes, they played Seattle, but they also played Vancouver and Chicago and Calgary, teams that are not in the playoffs. And they got smokes in just about every one of those games. They gave up 26 goals in the 5-game road trip. They're on their 3rd and 4th string goaltenders. Just don't see it happening for Ottawa. Now, I don't feel bullish about Calgary either, Pierre. They're not playing great. The games in hand don't look great for them. Nashville's ahead of them. Winnipeg is 5 points up, same number of games. They haven't been able to string anything together for long stretches this year, so I don't know why they would now. But just by the math and the amount of competition for that spot, I'd have to say Calgary. But I think, unfortunately, neither one is going to get it.
Yeah, I don't think neither one either. And, for the Senators who have been, played some pretty good hockey until this road trip, it's a reminder that, second year in a row where November was the abyss for them. And it just, this idea that the points matter more now this time of year, you got to come out of the gates, right? You got to come out of the gates. And Ottawa has been felled 2 years in a row. Now, last year didn't really matter because they were really still rebuilding, but they had higher hopes this year. And they got to get that right next year because you dig a hole. And it's incredible. And we're lucky to have MJ, who's the math guy. But it is so hard to dig out of a hole the way these 3-point games work in the NHL. Like, they're always like, well, they won 7 out of 10. Yeah, well, the 2 teams they're chasing just went to overtime the other night. Like, it's just this idea of it's deceptive when you look at the standings and think that it's right there. It's actually harder.
Yeah,
is I guess what I
always. 6 points seems like nothing with 2 games in hand. We're like, we're win our games and we're like 1 game out. Never works out that way. It never. Just last night, we had all these bottom feeders, Chicago and Arizona and Columbus and Montreal and all the teams battling for Bedard, winning games. Like it just never happens that you run the table the way you think you possibly could to make that kind of inroads in the standings.
So that was going to be our next topic. I mean, teams that haven't gotten the memo. Players, Clayton Keller. Somebody send Clayton Keller the memo. First star of the week, pile of points. Coyotes are winning games. Vancouver Canucks, I think, have rattled off 5 in a row. You got the Chicago Blackhawks and their chants. And their fans chanting overrated at the Boston Bruins because things are going so darn well there. Like, it's mayhem near the bottom of the standings where presidents and GMs and owners just want the losses to pile up for just a month here or so, Johnny.
Yeah, you're right. Now, testament to the players who know they're not supposed to be good, who know their teams aren't as good, but they have the pride and the competitive spirit to play. To say, forget you, ownership, management, who have some sort of plans about drafting some guy who's going to take my job or help me when I'm no longer on this team. I don't want to hear about Leo Carlsson, 3rd overall, because guess what? He's either going to replace me or I'm gone by the time he gets here. So guys will play hard. Like, even the worst teams are going to win 4 out of 10 games. They're beating somebody. And so we shouldn't be surprising, but you see one like that. And like for teams like Chicago and Arizona who have clearly identified what their objective is this year, and it's not to win as many games as possible. It's almost like you can't even lose the way you're supposed to. Like you're so messed up, you can't even screw it up.
They're
on
7th.
Purpose.
I think they're 7th in the odds race for Bedard. Now somehow they've got themselves to 7th.
It's no good.
And to MJ's point too, there's players fighting for a role next year. I mean, you were working the Habs game last night, MJ, in Pittsburgh. Now, by the way, Montreal no business winning that game, but sometimes that's hockey for you. But a third of Montreal's lineup were guys that weren't supposed to play in the NHL this year, pretty much, with all their injuries here in the second half. You know, those guys are trying to prove a point to management that they should be in the conversation come training camp. So that has a way of going against tanking too, because players care about their own livelihoods. And
I've played on bad teams, sadly, more often than I wanted to. And you can find some pretty direct individual motivation to be good. Whether it's financial, whether it's career, whether it's trying to achieve milestones, 10 goals, 20 goals, whatever it might be. Like you can really push yourself. And people might call it garbage time, and it is because it doesn't matter in the standings, but you'll get that and you can do it within a team concept. Pierre, you're absolutely right. Guys playing. And if it's not your team, somebody's watching. Some other team is watching you that might be looking for something that you can bring. So it's not lost on the guys that, it might not matter in the standings, but it matters to you personally.
So the Edmonton Oilers, meanwhile, on the other side of things, Leon Draisaitl, guys, I don't know, the stat that stuck out to me, there were a couple, becomes the 6th player born in Europe with 4 100-point seasons in his career. The other names on this list, like Stastny, Curry, Jagr, Solani, Ovechkin, sometimes there's an overshadowing, I think. I mean, with
common there.
There's something, like McDavid doing what he's doing, that's going to be where the bulk of the conversation lies. But Johnny, what's the right way to talk about Leon Draisaitl here in the pantheon of great players in the game right now, but bigger picture when you look at comparisons like this and numbers like this? Like, where's the right place to put Draisaitl?
Right at the top. Right below the guy who's at the top. And the guy who's at the top is teammate. And I think that's what kind of makes this conversation seemingly more difficult than it really actually is. Because yes, they play on the same team. And yes, they play in the power play together. And yes, they actually play quite a bit 5-on-5 together, but not always. And Leon has showed in previous seasons, he doesn't need Connor McDavid specifically to pile up points. The fact that he churns out 50 goals and 100 points like year after year after year, or something really close to it, and we almost ho-hum it. Like it's not that big of a deal. What are we talking about? You just said how many European-born players have had as many 100-point seasons as him. We talk about the 50-goal years. We talk about the individual hardware. Whatever the conversation is for next best player, he's in that conversation. We can debate, is he first? Is he fifth? Is he seventh? And it's McKinnon, and it's Crosby, and it's McCarr, and it's Matthews, and it's all the usual suspects. He's in that conversation, and you can make a very compelling argument that he should be towards the top of it because he's amazingly consistent. Now, is he a perfect player? Is there, parts of his game we can pick at? Sure. But offensively, he is as good as anyone in the league not named Connor McDavid.
By the way, Peter Stastny, little piece of trivia, had the second most points in the decade of the 1980s behind only Wayne Gretzky. I always it's one of my favorite trivia answers. Great player, underrated superstar. You know, I think Leon Draisaitl is Evgeny Malkin to Sidney Crosby. I mean, it's the cleanest,
right?
At least situational comparison I can find as far as if Evgeny Malkin had played on almost any other team in the league throughout his career, he'd be the number one person on that franchise and might even be looked at differently. Mm-hmm. But you play with Sidney Crosby all this time. By the way, Sidney Crosby having another amazing season. But that's just what happens. And you know, Malkin won his own Conn Smythe and has done a lot of great things. It's not like people haven't noticed. But I think to your question, Ryan, you know, the idea of what, you know, how Draisaitl is being impacted as far as out of market narrative or perception, I think it's very similar.
Shoggy, what about in market? You're in Edmonton.
Yeah.
Like I would hope that the people of Edmonton, the fans of the Oilers, would appreciate just how great he is and not sort of just lump him in as a guy who's being dragged along by McDavid's backdraft. Like how is he perceived in Edmonton? Hopefully as good as he is.
They're in a completely different category as they should be. I think, you know, obviously, I think people realize what we're witnessing in Connor McDavid. I think everybody has a pretty firm understanding of that. But
well, it's the right market to recognize it.
Yeah, exactly. But Draisaitl's right there, and there's major separation. So I just think Oiler fans recognize that to have two of the top, insert your number here, 3, 4, 5 players on the planet at the same time is pretty special. I think he's immensely appreciated here. And I think people recognize the other stat guys, and maybe this puts it in a little bit of perspective of just how rare it is to have these two players playing together at the same time. It's the second time in history that teammates are the first and second player to reach 100 points in a season. The first two guys in the league to do it, and the last guys were Esposito and Orr. So, I mean, that kind of just puts in a perspective to have that much separation between your top guys and so many other top guys around the league. It's pretty special. Then you see last night, like Leon Draisaitl on the ice defending a lead in the last minute of a game, taking multiple faceoffs in his own end. He was fantastic defensively last night. He's the first to admit and know about himself that the consistency of the overall game maybe isn't where it should be. He even said last night, I think we all know, I'm not the best forechecker. It comes and goes with him, but when he decides to buckle down on it and focus on it, which is playoff time, quite frankly, incredibly usable at both ends of the ice. And his overall game, you'd put up against a lot of high-quality two-way players when he decides, Johnny, to lean into that part of his game.
But see, like that, I don't think that's a defense of his greatness. Like, that's almost more of an indictment of his greatness. The fact that if he wanted to, he has the capability. It's not like he can't be better defensively.
He's got other stuff to worry about. You know, he's got other things to worry about.
But can he not worry about everything at once like he does in the playoffs? So, and I think if you're going to criticize Leon Draisaitl, he's a pretty self-aware guy. Like, he's a bright guy, and he knows, you know, whether it's the defensive parts of the game, whether it's the forechecking stuff, you know, he has more at times in the regular season. But it's not like he can't. And that's the thing. It's not like he can't when he wants to, if he's able to expend that much energy. Part of it, too, I wonder, Pierre, as I go on a tangent. Yeah. McDavid and Draisaitl play a lot. Like, a lot of minutes. They play games where they get 24, 25, 26 minutes, which is a ton for forwards. And you wonder if there's some sort of conservation of energy at times well with how those guys play.
Right. Well, I'll tell you something else. I think Jacob Chikrin's going to know the next time he's going into a corner with Leon Draisaitl.
Oh, yeah. He popped him good last night.
MJ, you were on air still, I think. That was running into a Mack truck. Like, honestly, I think Chikrin will wake up today and say, I'd
rather be on that guy's team today.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Could have said that too.
Yeah. No, a fantastic season for Draisaitl. Pierre, more thought on that, or are you good?
I'm good.
So Oilers putting together a nice little stretch here. They recently beat the Boston Bruins. Tough loss against the Maple Leafs has people worried about their consistency. But come playoff time, they've shown they can bring their top end game. Over an 82-game schedule, there's still some up and down in their consistency. Okay, guys, let's get to a little segment I'm going to call Notables. Just literally name that right now. I'm going to toss something out. You guys can just give me a quick thought on it before we get to our final segment. Notable, Jonathan Drouin. We'll start with you, Pierre. 1 goal on 60 shots this year. 1.7 is his shooting percentage. But in 45 games played, he's got 1 goal and 24 assists. That's a bizarre stat line for a guy like Drouin. 1 goal, 24 assists. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, nice little wrist shot last night in the game. MJ was doing that test. I think it was the first shot that Casey DeSmith faced after replacing Tristan Jarry. You know, I don't know what the future holds for Jonathan Drouin. I mean, I think you have to call it for what it is. There was no market for him at the deadline. I don't believe a single team phoned Montreal asking about a pending UFA who was once a high-end first-round pick. You know, that Jonathan Drouin has gone through a lot, and you know, I think a lot of people around him are just happy to see him enjoy the game, to be quite honest. And you know, I'm one of those people that enjoys when he's having good games, given what he's gone through, and he has had some good moments in the second half on an injury-riddled Montreal team, but in terms of him being UFA July 1st and what the future holds, I think it's difficult to predict. I just think teams aren't quite sure at this point what they're getting in him.
Well, I mean, he's on pace for 40-plus assists. That's a big number. Yeah. He's on pace for 2 goals. That's a small number. The reason why he doesn't score, and you're right, Pierre, Jonathan Drouin has fought injury, he's fought some off-ice stuff, and he's back playing, and he's feeling relatively healthy. He plays around the perimeter of the offensive zone. So you're wondering, how could you possibly shoot 2%? Well, if your shots are mostly from the edges, you don't get to the front of the net that often. You know, your shooting percentage will not be as good because he's not taking the ones that go in. And he's not blessed with a great shot. He's pass first mentality, but it is unique because you think he plays in the power play. Like something's going to tip, something's going to hit your shin pad, something's going to go in some other way. He's still an effective player when he's at his best. You can see that kind of flash of skill that made him such a high pick. I don't know if it's injury history. I don't know if it's uncomfortable just being in some of those areas, but he doesn't kind of take the puck to those areas with the same regularity that he once did.
Definitely echo Pierre's sentiment, though. We do know he's been through a lot, and good to see him back playing and enjoying the game. Okay, the goaltenders who were traded for each other. Korpisalo's 3-0 with a 929. Jonathan Quick's 4-0 with a 930, Johnny. Kind of bizarre. These two goalies get swapped, and both immediately up their play and start knocking it out of the park.
If you were to ask me who I think is more likely to sustain their current pace, it's the guy in LA. Like, I think Korpisalo, because he's played better this year. He plays for a good defensive team in LA. I think he probably will do something like he's doing, which is what they got him to do. Jonathan Quick, to me, I have a hard time understanding this because it's not like he didn't play for a good defensive team in LA, even if Vegas is good. And like, I get motivation, but it's not like he wasn't motivated to try to stop pucks as hard as he could in LA. He wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to try on this one. He's trying as hard as he can all the time. So I don't know if it's just a hot streak or if it's a system that works with him or if it's just his competitive juices are burning so hot he's somehow mentally more dialed in. Pierre, I don't know. I can't see him playing at 940. He was one of the bottom few goalies in the league all year long, and now he stepped in. He looks like the guy from whatever, when they were winning cups back in the mid-2010s. So
he had the pride
I don't know
hit.
What to make of it.
He got hit in the pride a little, though, Pierre. You never know what that'll do for a guy.
Yeah, I mean, 2-time Cup champion, so that intangible is obviously at play right now. I just don't know if there's sustainability. I mean, no one would know Jonathan Quick better than the LA Kings. And trading him was a very emotional decision. It rocked the boat a little. It didn't make everyone happy, but they did it because they truly believed that they had seen enough and that he could not be in net for their playoffs. So I find it hard to believe that somehow the Kings weren't right about that. But it's fascinating because he's with their rivals now. And I know Vegas hasn't been in the league that long, but believe me, Vegas and LA, as we've seen, are rivals. And it's a juicy storyline. They're not going to play each other in the first round probably because they're 1-2 right now in the Pacific. But it's it's almost to me like when Milan Lucic goes from Edmonton to Calgary. It's like, well, which team knows what here. And I get it. James Neal was part of that deal and all that, but there's still.
Yeah, but Luch didn't step in, Pierre, and score 40 goals. Like what Jonathan Quick is doing is like, where'd this come from?
Yeah.
Like, where did this come from?
Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Last one, Elias Pettersson last night trying to wave off a penalty, a tripping penalty. Johnny, I know you were working and traveling, but
I saw it.
You saw it. I don't know. We've seen this a few times.
Yeah.
What do we think here? Yeah, Makar did it. I don't know, Johnny. You okay with it, or is it like take the penalty and run, man?
You're asking me. I'm taking the penalty, man. I don't care. Like, how many times do they make a mistake where we get penalized as a team? I'm not trying to be a hero in a tight game and be like, no. I'm such an honest competitor that I don't. He kind of touched my feet, but I kind of caught myself. Like, forget that. No way. And if I'm one of the guys on this team, we said this about Cale Makar. Like, don't take me off the power play. I want to get on the power play and go and score some points. So, listen, these things have a way of evening out in the wash. I like the spirit behind
it's honorable. It's honorable,
Yeah,
Johnny. It's
sure.
being an honest, good sport.
Did the penalty get taken away?
No, I don't think it did.
No. So who cares? Like, you're just doing it for show. They're not going to take it away after the fact. So, I wouldn't have done it.
I'm guessing Pete likes it. Pete likes it.
Star players can get away with it though, right? Because no one's going to get on Pettersson for doing that. But if you're not a star player, like, dude, it's a 2-goal game. Like, we take the penalties here. We're trying to win. We're not trying to win a participation medal
here. Pierre?
So,
I think when Makar did it, we did a red card, yellow card.
Yeah.
We did, yeah.
Card. And speaking of which, I wonder what a professional soccer player somewhere in the world watching that is saying right now.
Oh, I know. Because they go so far the other way.
That I think of where they'd be like doing the opposite in terms of trying to draw a penalty. It doesn't bother me. I mean, I think that
Pierre,
it's not. First of all, I don't think it's something that is predetermined as far as him going into a game saying
it's instinctive
borderline.
in the moment.
It just happens in the moment. Like
overtime, game 3 of the playoffs. You okay with the guy doing that?
No, of course
not.
Well,
of course
wait
not.
a second. You can't have it both ways.
No,
Either
here's how you can have it both ways.
Or you're there
Here's
for the
how you can have it both ways. These guys build long-term relationships with referees that are in this game. If you make a referee look foolish, it hurts your reputation with that ref, and maybe in an important moment, you don't get a call. So these guys are also managing their reputations out there over the long haul, Johnny.
So by waving the ref off, are you helping that relationship, or are you making him look foolish? You tell me, because to me, you're making the referee look bad. We're like, no, you got that one wrong, and everyone's.
But he can reverse his call, can't he? If the player's like, yeah, no, don't. He could just go, oh, okay, no penalty.
So you think the ref looks good in that situation?
Yeah.
Please. That is a stretch. So you either get the honorable, good-hearted, Samaritan hockey player, or you get the guy who's trying to win. You don't get both. You get to pick one or the other. Which one you want?
And you know what? By the way, I would love to see, since we've been in a 2-ref system for so many years now, that in football, and you guys wear my cowboy shirt, one thing that I've actually liked about football officiating the last few years, there's a lot of things not to like, but one thing that I've liked is they actually pick up more flags than they used to, because they have a crew and they talk after a play and they're like, you know what, that ball wasn't catchable. That's not PI or whatever. I wish we had that more in hockey, where the second guy on the ice is like, come here for a second, let's just chat about this. This is what I saw from my angle. And then they come out of it and say, you know what, that wasn't a trip. I think that'd be great. And
is that realistic between refs, though? Guy makes a call, you're really going to go over and be like, hey, buddy. I mean, isn't
big playoff game? You want to get it right, don't you?
You know what that is? That is segue into the GM meetings about expanding video replay, because this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. Like whether they get together and talk about it, which is essentially a replay of another eye, or whether someone buzzes down, say real quick, he didn't trip him. I don't like trips because but that was not his high stick. That was his teammate's high stick. That puck hit the glass. That puck caught the mesh.
Yeah.
Like those kind of black and white calls, those should be reviewable. Because if I can do a broadcast and in 8 seconds my truck is fast enough, I'm like, oh no, that was Pierre LeBrun who hit me with my teammate high stick. Then they could do that in the game. It doesn't slow it down. Take 2 seconds. Take 2 seconds, and the team who gets the penalty taken away, no one's going to complain because you can show them you shouldn't have had it to begin with. I'm for this. I've been on this for a while, and I'm glad that they're approaching these conversations.
More stoppages, more video review. Hey, Pierre?
There's already a stoppage on the penalty, Shoggy.
Longer stoppage.
If you listen to the
I just told you it's 8 seconds before the guy even gets to the box. He's turned around and gone back to the bench. Ask me between the benches. I'll tell them. He won't even go to the box.
Go to the color guy.
Yeah.
It's certainly important not to further delay a game, but to your point, it can be done quickly. But the last thing that's Chris Johnson talked about with Drags in their insider trading hit is that they got the sense this was not something that was imminent, that this was just a start of a conversation that often takes a few years before the GMs and the league hockey operations agree on where to go. And that is true, because I can tell you that offside review and coaches challenge, I must have gone to like 6 or 7 GM meetings before it finally saw the light of day. I would not expect this overnight. Okay, so here's my proposal. It takes 10 seconds. All
Last
right, guys,
point, we're moving on. Go.
We're going to review pucks over the glass, whether or not they hit the glass. We're going to review pucks in the mesh or not, whether they hit the mesh. We're going to review high sticks to see if they got struck with their own guy's stick. Okay? Good. That's what we're going to... Not is that a trip? Is that a hold? Is that a hook?
Yes.
Ones that are right or wrong, we're going to introduce it. And guess what? We're introducing it tomorrow. And that's fine. No problem. It'll take 2 seconds. Wrap it up. We don't need Pierre coming back here for 6 more years.
I don't disagree with that, Johnny. I think those are fair points. Easy changes to make. NHL not known for making fast, easy changes, though. So a few more GM meetings before that one gets done. All right, time now for red card, yellow card, no card. You know it, you love it, you miss it. And Terry Ryan is going to join us as our ultimate arbiter. So we're going to actually talk about the GM meetings, because one of the big topics that they're dealing with right now is having to fight after you throw a clean body check. And so this is the subject of our red card, yellow card, no card. We're going to start with the ultimate arbiter, Terry Ryan. So here's the scenario. You're playing a professional hockey game. Somebody hits your teammate. It was a clean hit. You skate up to that player, you drop your gloves, and you bare knuckles punch him in his face. Red card, yellow card, no card. TR.
When it comes to dropping the gloves against an opposing player who made a good clean hit on your teammate, I'm saying yellow card on the play. While I'll never fault a player for standing up for a teammate, if the hit was deemed clean, the onus is on the player to keep his head up, something we learn in the early to mid stages of minor hockey. Dropping the gloves in response to a clean hit not only slows the game down, but often gives momentum to the team who made the hit in the first place. Sometimes the line is foggy, and like I said, I'll never fault someone for being a good teammate. However, yellow card on the play. Final answer.
Okay, the ultimate arbiter, Terry Ryan. Listen, this is a big issue, and there's lots of nuance. So, we're having some fun there with Terry. But, Johnny, I'll put it to you first. How big a problem is it? Is there a solution needed?
I don't think it's a massive problem, because it doesn't happen that often. And is there a solution needed? I think the question becomes, how much fighting are you okay with in the NHL? Because what is happening now is within the framework of the rules of the game, right? Like, you're allowed to fight. And if you instigate a fight, there is a penalty corresponding with that instigating effort. So if that's what happens and you call that penalty and guys are willing to take that penalty, then they are like, it's all going the way it's supposed to go. The question becomes, how many fights are you okay with? And if you're not okay with these kind of fights, and I generally I would prefer not to see them, then how can you curb guys that are behaving within the rules? You have to change the rules, because the rules are not curbing the behavior to the degree that you want. Then the next one is, well, what changes could you make? Here's my changes real quick. If I have this idea, Pierre, right? You can propose to set the GM meetings next time for the new rule. So there's 2 ways you can do it. One is that you can charge an added 5 instead of a 2. Like, if you get the instigator, it's not just a 2-minute minor, but a 5-minute major. So increase the penalty for the team, not the individual. You can sit the guy in the box for 30 minutes. It doesn't really matter, right? Like, 17 minutes, 22 minutes, whatever it is. But if you make it a 5 that the team has to kill for that, guys would think twice about doing it. The other thing is, let's say, Ryan, you hit me. Pierre goes to defend me, goes to fight you. You know what's coming. We see it all the time. And so guys kind of square up, get ready to fight. And so they often don't call the instigator in that situation because you were prepared for it. In that situation, I think you should also always call the instigator, even if the hitter is prepared to eventually get into that fight and he doesn't get, jumped. He turns around, his gloves go off at the same time, and the reason he's fighting is the other guy has started it.
He's defending himself. Yeah.
Call it more often, whether it's a 2 or 5. If you really want to make it penal and slow this down, make it a 5-minute major penalty for instigating a fight like that. I think if you do that, then I don't think we see it quite so much, which I don't think would be a bad thing to take this out or curb it just a bit.
Yeah, I'm of two minds because I go back to if someone took a run at Wayne Gretzky, that Dave Semenko was on the next shift.
It's not the 1980s.
I know, but the point I would make is that I generally don't like it. I think a clean hit should be left alone. But if someone's taking a run at Cale Makar, I think if you're the Avalanche, I don't mind seeing someone saying...
Take the 5-minute major.
Correct. But if someone took the same run, and I'm not... Jack Johnson, I'm not... And listen, good NHL veteran.
We get it, Pierre. We get it.
Well, I'm just saying, I think that if you're running Connor McDavid or Mitch Marner, it's a different reaction, and I think that's just reality. It sounds elitist and that everyone's in hockey is supposed to be the same. They're not, and I think that's why I'm leaving some leeway for the retaliation when it comes to protecting your top player.
Johnny, I'm with you.
You said running. You said running, Pierre. Running implies you're breaking the rules there. So if someone's running Makar, call the penalty on the guy running him if he's breaking the rules. If he's hitting Cale Makar to defend the guy who can skate around him, what? I got to go fight someone because of that? I got Curtis McDermott's going to come knock my block off, and give me a concussion like that. No, like that's. Yeah. I don't think so. And it's okay. Listen, and if a team is so offended by McDavid getting hit, and they're willing to take on a 5-minute major, then okay.
I don't think the game does a good enough job of punishing players who drop their gloves and start punching a guy who clearly doesn't want to fight. I think that needs to be multiple game suspensions. It's like because there's fighting allowed in the game when guys are willing, all of a sudden it's not nearly as egregious if a guy starts fighting with a guy who's not fighting back. I think there needs to be a greater understanding of how suspendable that play should be so that if you throw a clean hit and a guy wants to come up and fight you and you don't want to fight, you don't fight. And that the penalty for a guy literally jumping you, Johnny, to your point, up the instigator to a 5. But the league also needs to step in and say, you're not allowed to drop your gloves with someone who has not clearly indicated they're willing to fight and punch him in the face, or that's a 2-game suspension. We never see guys that instigate a fight, the other guy's unwilling and doing his best to just hang on. We never see suspensions follow that up, and I don't know why we don't. Dropping your gloves and punching someone in the face if they're not ready and willing to fight should be a suspension.
Yeah. I think that the fact that this has become a storyline shows that we're a bit bored right now, and that the game is so good right now, to be honest, that we're looking for things to talk about. The reality is there's so little fighting in today's NHL. And it's just, and it's not so much because the instigator rule came in decades ago or because of this or because of that. It's really just because
players don't fight.
Of your roster.
Yeah.
Your fourth line players skate 100 miles an hour. And so I get it. It's a fun discussion, and I agree with what you said, Ryan. But I just think this is not really something that I'm looking at every night in the NHL.
They're talking about it at the meetings, though.
Yeah, probably because they have nothing else to talk about.
Right.
I mean,
well, but just because the game's in a good place doesn't mean you can't improve a little bit. But the only other part of this conversation I would add, and Shaggy, to your point, if someone is going to go after a guy for something he did and fight him when he doesn't want to, make sure to call the guy for whatever he's doing, if it's against the rules, more often as well. Yep. So if I can't just cross-check anybody willing, just as much as I want, and then not get a penalty, and they're like, oh no, you jumped me, you get suspended. The thing that draws a reaction, if it's it's outside the rule book, make sure to call that as well.
For sure. And if they do that, if the ref throws his arm up and the guy on his way to exact revenge sees the arm goes up, he's not necessarily going to take the instigator and take the 5.
Maybe not.
Harsher penalty for instigator and call it more often, Pierre.
You know what's interesting in general too, by the way, I had this conversation recently with someone, but isn't it interesting that, do you know how often I would have to do either a SportsCenter hit or write an article based on some egregious incident that happened the night before, and we were waiting for Brendan Shanahan and player safety to weigh in, or before him, Colin Campbell. Like, I'm not out to. I don't know exactly why we've gotten there. I think Rule 48's had a pretty impact, and again, I think the type of players that we populate rosters with has had an impact here too. But we don't spend a lot of time talking about player safety anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's good.
It's very interesting. Like, it's a very quiet thing compared to. I mean, at least once a week we had a major incident. Everyone's weighing in. Should that be 5 games, 10 games? The game's not really like that right now.
Yeah. All right. That was red card, yellow card, no card. I don't know, Johnny. So what was it for you? A yellow card then for you?
Probably a yellow, given the way the rules are currently.
Me too. I'm right there in that yellow card zone. P?
No card.
No card. You
overblown.
Neanderthal. Yeah. You absolute Neanderthal.
I don't think there should be fighting in the game, but I'm just saying this particular narrative is, I think, overblown.
That is red card, yellow card, no card. Brought to you, by the way, by Liberty Smart Security, a company that always specializes in having your back. They've got high-quality advanced smart security systems for your home or for your business, your office. They use leading-edge technology to protect the things that you value most in life. Your home is your castle. Protect it with Liberty Smart Security, and visit libertysecurity.ca to see all that they have to offer. All right, guys, we've probably gone a little too long. Pierre, anything else out of the GM meetings you want to just hit on quick? Or to your point, there's not a lot going on.
I know. I wasn't there.
I know, but you're paying attention. You're making calls. You're on your phone.
Yeah, I didn't really pay attention. I got to be honest.
Not a great set of meetings this year.
I'm watching the hits from CJ and Dregs and Gino, but otherwise I'm not dialed in on that.
All right, boys. I don't know. We were average this week. Johnny, I don't know. What do you think? We've done better before, haven't we?
Maybe, but I was not. I was above average. You can grade yourself. You can give yourself a yellow card. I'm giving myself a no card. I'm fine with my performance this morning. Off an early flight, I thought Pierre was fantastic despite wearing Cowboys gear. I thought he was solid.
Ezekiel Elliott being Dallas Cowboys cutting ties with Ezekiel Elliott. It's an emotional day.
Tough to be a running back nowadays in the NFL. We don't have enough time for this, but man, that would be a tough position to play. It's like a fighter in the NHL.
On that.
You guys start talking NFL, I fade the music in like I'm doing right now. That'll wrap the podcast. Johnny, Pierre, thank you kindly, gentlemen. We'll be back next week, folks. As always, a huge thanks to our sponsors, Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals, Liberty Smart Security, as well as Kuma Outdoor Gear. Have a fantastic finish to your Wednesday. Look forward to chatting again soon. Cheers. Company. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals provides equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry. But what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company. I've been to the offices. I've seen how they proudly display that on the wall at each branch. Every one of the staff members lives by the get-her-done formula to ensure they'll never let their customers down. They'll bend over backwards to get their clientele what they need when they need it. They don't make excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in this attitude, and they truly believe that the success of their customer is their success. You can't get much more Canadian than that.